Hi, this is Paul, and most of you will recognize John Van Donk, who is with me today. He and I, over the years, have had quite a few conversations about Estuary, and I've been talking about the fact that in January at Living Stones, we're going to go to every week Estuary on Sunday morning at probably 9 a.m. And I'll update the meetup.com list for that as we go. And I was at a meeting with John a little while ago, and we thought it would probably be good to talk a little bit about how Estuary continues to develop in local groups and some of what we're learning as we continue on with this. I would have to say that probably the birth of Estuary for me was probably January of 2018 when we started our first Jordan Peterson meetup, and John and I sort of got going at the same time, and it's continued to evolve as we've done it. We just had a major article written about it in the banner. At first, they were going to sort of write a little 600-word blurb, but eventually it's probably about a 2,000-word article that they put in, wasn't it? And that's got quite a bit of attention. I made a presentation at my Classis meeting. Classis is sort of the regional judiciary in the Christian Reformed Church, and had a couple of pastors come up afterwards, express a lot of interest in it. And one actually went to an LSNET meeting and is super excited about it. And so he intends to start a meeting in his congregation in the San Francisco Bay Area in January. So he's working on that. And so, yeah, the Estuary thing continues to grow and develop. So
exciting.
It is. And I've got just Monday, I head off to Europe, where we will have the Breakwater Festival. And of course, the Breakwater Festival grows out of the German language estuary there. And they're continuing to develop it in Mannheim and that area. And I will then, after the ARC Festival, I will be in the UK, and Tayo and John Lumgar are organizing where I will go and what we will do in London. And the Hollanders, the busy Hollanders, they've got doing some thinking there too. And I will very much miss my traveling partner this time. I'm sure I will eat far less herring on this trip than I did last trip. But John, I will have to go on without you, I'm afraid.
No problem at all.
Okay. So
I wish you success.
Well, it's I will kind of miss John's take charge attitude. When we would go into a place, John would look around and say, no, these chairs need to be moved. And John would start moving around the furniture and get everything set up, and off we would go. So that was a lot of good memories from last year's trip, John.
Yeah. Maybe you'll catch the ferry on time.
No ferry this year. I am flying from Frankfurt to Heathrow. I am not monkeying around with through the night driving and getting ferry tickets going the wrong way. Hopefully there'll be no train strikes in the UK this time. So.
There you go. Yeah.
All right, John. So what's on your mind for today?
Well, I mean, as you already pointed out, we are learning things, and we're learning things about our own local estuaries. We're learning to see what works, what doesn't work, what is actually happening. And I had the amazing experience this past Tuesday of having so many people attend my estuary in Chino that we had to split into two groups. You've mentioned to me before that you've had to do that, and it was a new experience for me. I've been a little bit resistant to doing that, but the number was just outrageous. So we had to split into two groups, and we had to find a space at Crosspoint Church, and there was no space, so we ended up sitting in the hallway somewhere. It was kind of a cool first experience, but yeah, it does put one's mind into gear to say, well, what is actually happening here, and who shows up? And there are a number of different ways to stratify that, and I'm perhaps I am unnecessarily cognizant of these different kinds of ways in which you can divide a group. In my group, I'm always very pleased to be able to tell people that, I on any given meeting, I will have a couple of Jews and a Muslim and a couple of atheists and two former Jehovah's Witnesses and a bunch of 2.5 Christians, and so the group is very mixed in that sense in terms of their ideological background, but then I got to thinking, what other way is there that we can talk about who shows up at an estuary meeting? And I came up with the idea of pipelines. In other words, what are the pipelines by which people show up at a meeting?
You know, when I put this in the title, estuary pipelines, there's going to be a lot of people that go to YouTube and type in estuary and pipeline, and they're thinking, you know, water pipes, and they're gonna hear about these small groups that we're holding. So we'll see what happens with that. Estuary pipelines.
Well, I mean, you hear it all the time because, you know, people regularly say, well, I just came to this estuary by the usual Jordan Peterson pipeline. And, you know, then it's Jordan Peterson, John Vervaeke, Jonathan Pajot, Paul Renaclay. And then I met you and now I'm here. So that's kind of the way that this often gets expressed. So that's where the word pipeline comes from. But in my own situation here, I simply observed that, I mean, I have about 12 people who are really regular in my estuary, and those are divided equally into 3 groups. And there will be a certain segment that have heard about the local estuary in Chino from their engagement with TLC, with this little corner of the internet, an online iteration of conversation and YouTube videos and subchannels and people in communication with each other in a kind of a little what do you call that? A little ecology. It's a little ecology that exists by itself. And people get to talking with each other and say, well, have you gone to a local estuary yet? Yes, no, well, there's one there and there. Let's go see it. So I have a bunch of people come in. Some drive quite a long ways. But they know you and they have heard about estuary, and they perhaps were at the conference. You know, some of the people in my estuary, of course, were at the conference and had their exposure that way. And so that's one pipeline. I call it the TLC pipeline. And it is a pipeline of people that speak a certain kind of language, because the TLC community has its own language. And so they are very familiar with the 4 Ps of John Vervaeke, and they know about symbolic language. There might be a 1.5 orthobro in there, and so there's all these unique characteristics of the people who come through the TLC pipeline, and it's a cool group of people. I mean, they're enthusiastic and they know each other already outside of the group, so they already can compare notes with one another, and they often drive in together, as a matter of fact. So that's one pipeline into my local estuary. So on every first and third Tuesday night of every month, there will be some TLC guys there and gals. And then there is the Meetup.com pipeline. And that is a whole other can of worms, because how do people learn about estuary on Meetup.com? It requires that they will have first signed up with Meetup.com, and in the process of signing up, say something about themselves. Meetup.com asks you to fill out a little bit of a profile. So where do you live and what are your interests? You know, what kind of meetings, what kind of gatherings can we suggest for your perusal or participation? And so people write down, well, I'm interested in religious conversation, or I'm interested in spirituality, or I'm interested in zeitgeist or current events or whatever, you know, and or they could be interested in fly fishing or Braille book reading or making bran muffins. You know, I mean, there's all these different things that people do together. And so you sign up for Meetup.com, and then you express your interest, and then you sit and wait. Now, then there is the flip side of that, and that is if I have an event and I want the Meetup.com people to know about it, that requires that I sign up on Meetup.com. I start a group on meetup.com. My group is called the Inland Empire Estuary. And then people can sign up to become members of the group. And by now I have about 120 members in my group. But there is another part to it, and that is events. If you don't have any events, you can have a group as big as you want, but if you don't have any events, then nothing will ever happen and nobody will be invited to an event. But if you do organize events and you religiously list them on meetup.com with the date and time and place and all the details that they require, then meetup.com makes a judgment about what kind of an event is this, that they take that from the profile of the group and the profile of the event. And they say, we have a bunch of people who would be interested in this. So we'll send a notification to all these people in your area, and we'll tell them that this group is happening on Tuesday night. And if they're interested, they can show up. And wouldn't you know, if you describe your group and you describe the event in the right kind of language, then people actually show up. Out of the blue. They've never heard of Jordan Peterson. They've never heard of Paul Van der Klee. They've certainly never heard of John Van Donk. And they are able to overcome their initial, it's going to be at a church. Dang it. I'm not sure I want to do that. But anyway, some of those people are able to overcome their initial resistance and show up at a meeting. And lo and behold, they like what happens there. So that's a separate group of people.
Have you played around with, because I've done zero playing around. I started using meetup.com in January of 2018, but I haven't spent any time in terms of fiddling with my profile, basically search engine optimization. I haven't done anything like that. And we've always had certain people just come in cold from meetup.com, and sometimes they fit and sometimes they didn't. And so I should probably tweak that. Do you have any wisdom that you've figured out in terms of tweaking that profile yet?
Well, there is one word that I need to get out of the profile, which is still in there right now, and that is the word debate. There's, you don't want to have a debate.
No, I wouldn't want that word in there.
But it's still on my profile. So, I mean, the functionality of my Meetup account is in spite of the fact that I don't have the perfect language on there.
Okay.
But apparently, I haven't actually changed it very much. Apparently, I got the description right first time around. I actually get some compliments from people that show up and say, "Well, your description was really, clear and concise, and we know what's happening there." And I have a sample video of an estuary meeting that we created together. Maybe you recall.
Yeah,
so
the one that we did online.
Yeah, so I actually tell people, if you want to start a meetup.com account and describe your estuary, feel free to cut and paste from my page. And I share my Meetup page religiously with people. I mean, freely. And you can put it in the show notes for this thing also, that people can go there themselves and check out what it actually says there. So, okay, so then that is the way. I haven't really tweaked it a lot. I kind of did it one way, and it seems to be happening. So don't know
that is a whole avenue of thought. And maybe have you ever had a discussion on ElseNet about that?
About optimizing it?
Yeah.
Well, I simply tell people that they're welcome to use my page, and I have not invited any feedback. I probably should do that. That's not a bad idea, where we can kind of compare notes with each other about that. Yeah. Now, I do know that meetup.com is very regionally specific. In other words, there are some places where there is a large meetup.com community and activity, and they're very active, and other places where they're less visible in terms of, more urban areas will have greater exposure, and other more rural areas perhaps less so. Okay. So that I think it varies from place to place.
Oh, it's
not going to be the same everywhere.
Yeah, but it's something that I'll probably want to think about in terms of, especially as I retweak hours for Sunday morning, because I know some churches do use meetup.com just for their worship services.
Yeah.
And I've never done that, even though I've been paying. Meetup.com is really more expensive than what you get from it. I've never used it fully, but I've just kept paying for it. But yeah, I should probably give more thought to that in terms of opening up that pipeline, because I mostly just rely on the TLC pipeline because of my
Right.
internet.
But the interesting thing, the thing that made me notice it is that the numbers are so equally divided between TLC and Meetup.com. That was
Okay.
the big revelation for me.
Okay.
And then equally curious was the discovery for me that the third pipeline is the church pipeline. Well, blow me down. Who'd have thunk?
Well, especially you, because early on you're like, I'm not going to have this in the church. You just sort of kept it away from the church. Like, I have this little firewall between the church and my little estuary. I don't want those church people mucking up my estuary.
Exactly. And I
so
own that. And
I
confess my arrogance about that. And so as it turned out, of course, there is a little bit of a history there, because you and I started with Conversations on the Edge. We made those videos together with the intent of giving people at Crosspoint Church specifically permission to have conversations that were not particularly mainstream.
Right.
So that concept was already sort of that was given some form, and then the leadership at Crosspoint Church decided to give that some visibility on the website. So before there was any talk about Estuary, there was already a web page on the Crosspoint website that was entitled Conversations on the Edge, and it was described as an opportunity for people to ask bigger questions than what would normally come up in sermons or in Bible studies or small group gatherings at the church. So it was a unique new venue for different kind of discussion and conversation. You know, kind of along the lines of, did God really say that? You know? So
that's probably an interesting history that most people don't know in terms of how Estuary has developed, because I mean, in a lot of ways it's developed in different places in different ways. Mine obviously was sort of unique because of my channel. Yours, you ran it in the community house in the
where
Hills. And where you live, and then you moved it to church. And let me ask you this: why are people from your church starting to come to your estuary? Because that's you always had a few friends that came, we're always there for you.
Yeah.
But now
I do want to say something about that, though, because that has been a most amazing thing. I mean, I do have my friend Marv. We've been friends for 30 years. We've done so many things together, most of which failed. So we now have a long track record of failed ventures. And so then we were due for a few successes, and now it turns out that Estuary is really taking off, and he's been at it from the ground floor. He was always, whatever I would organize, he would show up for, and his role right now, I really do want to say something more methodical about the church pipeline, but perhaps in this particular moment, it's appropriate to say that Marv started bringing cookies.
Yeah.
Marv started bringing cookies to my estuary. Marv is always about food. Tonight, I have a dinner with our dinner group. He was very much part of the very beginning of that dinner group, and he just lives to have people around this table. And tonight it'll be at my house, so I'll be doing the cooking. But to have people around the table and gather and conversation and being able to see people face to face and invite other people to those gatherings, he lives for that. So that, and then it turned out that we've started a little thing in my estuary. It's several months old right now already. It's starting to take shape. Competitive cookie bringing.
Oh.
Because there are people that, I just tell them, I said, well, Marvin's not going to be here. Can somebody else bring the cookies? So then they bring the cookies. Well, these cookies are not as good as Marv's cookies. Oh, sorry. Well, I can do better. I'll try harder. So then the next time they come with better cookies. And the last meeting, we had 5 trays of cookies, one even better than the next. And it's not an issue at all because the boys from West LA, the ones that are, living by themselves, they take all the cookies and have half of them eaten by the time they even get home. So, yeah. Anyway, that about the cookies. But now, the other thing about my friends from church in the estuary, and I like that you brought them up, because there's another friend also. My good old friend Gary, I've been friends with him for years, and he showed up at the very beginning for an estuary meeting. He was very intrigued by what this was all about. He was mostly there to discover for himself what actually happens here, what is going on, and what are you trying to do here? And so he would come, and this was way in the beginning. And sure enough, there was one time when we had it all nicely advertised, and absolutely nobody showed up except him. So there we were with the 2 of us. And he said, John, this is a clear indication that we should now, and a great opportunity for us to redirect, go to a local pub, have some adult beverages, and then you take me home. He doesn't drive anymore, and then you take me home, and this evening will have been a success. And what an amazing way to reframe failure. No. It was not that nobody showed up. We were scheduled to do something else, perhaps as important or more so. So those 2 characters have been totally part of the beginnings of Estuary at Crosspoint Church. But as you observed, there's more to it now. So what happened? Well, the first thing that happened is that when you reframed and rebranded the Jordan Peterson meetup groups, and I joined you in that, and we this was after COVID, when we were starting to get back into group gatherings. There really wasn't much going on at Crosspoint Church in terms of adult ministries, and so yeah, we need something on the website. We need something on the calendar. Sure, John, whatever you're doing, we'll put it on the calendar and we'll put it on the website. Next thing you know is in August, there is a ministry fair. Ministry fair is where everybody gets a table. All the ministry leaders get a table. And then after church, everybody walks around to all the tables, and the women and their women's Bible study. They have it all decorated with flowers and pictures and candy and all of that. And I just have a sign, Estuary.
So Hollander, you should have had water and rocks.
No, yeah, and hotting, yeah, right. No. So anyway, but I was on the list. So I got a table and people walked by there. Well, what's Estuary? Well, and I just gave people a link, and it says you can go check it out online, and it's on the church website, and you go read more about it. And I had a few conversations with some people, because you're just standing there and people ask some questions. I said, well, this is just an opportunity to get together with some people and have conversations about things that you don't normally have a conversation about. You may have some bigger questions about church life or spirituality or God or history or whatever, and if you want to participate with someone else into something like that, this is where we gather for those kind of conversations. And we have a particular format. We have a protocol that makes it possible for everybody to feel like they can contribute something and can participate. And so, yeah, it's kind of a cool thing. Come check it out. And wouldn't you know, people started checking it out. And so then there's talk, so I have the wife of an elder show up. And then she has a hairdresser that she's been trying to get to come to church. The hairdresser is not particularly interested in coming to church, but then they had a different kind of a conversation, and the hairdresser said, oh, that I want to be part of. So now the hairdresser shows up that she's been working on for years to come to a church thing, and now she is at the Estuary. I had another lady with a graduate degree. She came once or twice and wasn't able to come, but then she talked to a friend. And she says, yeah, I really wish I could go more often. It conflicts with my schedule, but I think you'll like it. So she shows up. So then there is this, it's usually a word of mouth kind of thing, but we do have the church website, and we do have a page on the church website. So if people are looking to see what's going on at Crosspoint Church, they will eventually find that. So it's there. And then I think the big thing is, and it's hard to talk about that, because this is not something that everybody will have the same opportunity to do that, but it is a nice transition to another part of our conversation, the conference. So we organized, per your suggestion, the Estuary Conference in Chino. And I think that put the estuary concept and the estuary idea and the estuary project on the map as something that has some kind of credibility. When you are able to pack 200 people into a church, and they didn't even know what it even was beforehand. There was nobody at Crosspoint Church who really knew what we were organizing, because I did it mostly myself. And I got some logistical helps from the church staff, but as far as content-wise, they had no idea what was going to happen. So then all these people show up, and there is some interface, some interaction. You preached at church that day, and a bunch of people from the conference showed up in the church service, and all of a sudden, estuary is a thing. How about that? So that is the third pipeline, is the church, which pretty much presents an equal number of people on an average evening for an estuary meeting.
And
so
it shows up in the banner. And that, of course, once it's in the banner in the Christian Reformed Church, then it's a reality.
Yeah, right. that is true.
And it's true.
Yeah, and your guy did in fact show up on an ELSNet meeting last night, or yesterday. So you're right. It does happen that way.
I was surprised how much response when I went to classes. We had our classes meeting at the beginning of October. How many people at the classes meeting, not just ministers, mostly not ministers, because I think not a lot of ministers read the banner, but elders and deacons who do read the banner made a comment to me about estuary, that they had heard about it and saw it and were kind of curious about it. So that's part of that church pipeline. How did the conference, because part of what is developing in terms of this whole estuary ecosystem are conferences. How did the conference, which you had in Chino, impact participation in your local estuary?
I'm going to say no more than 3 people total directly from the conference.
Okay.
But 3 is 3.
Yeah.
And they're pretty regular. So yeah, and in fact, I put them in the category of the TLC crowd, because conferences, actually funny that we should be here at this juncture, because we are starting to think a little bit about how estuary relates to some of these other things. So how does estuary relate to TLC? How often should estuary be mentioned on your channel? How really, and how much do we make an effort to direct people to an estuary group in the TLC community? So there has to be some kind of ongoing conversation. You need to be totally in the loop in terms of, what is happening in estuary and what is happening on TLC. There's an important conversation that needs to continue in some form or another. Not sure that I can continue to always be doing that, but there are other people who are interested in that thing, and so I'm kind of steering some people in that direction. And then there's the conferences. Now the conferences are not the same as TLC. They are a separate thing, a separate phenomenon that happened, and so now it behooves us to think about, okay, so what is the relationship between the conferences and on-the-ground participation in TLC? So how should estuary be represented at these various conferences? How can the conferences help estuary? How can estuary help the conferences? There's kind of a symbiotic relationship there, and it behooves us in the project to have somebody designated to kind of cultivate that relationship and be a point person. We may even have, and I say this reluctantly, but I mean, I had a little bit of money left over from the conference, and we may be able to help some conferences, with some seed money and get things off the ground. but somebody has to have a relationship with the organizers, and it cannot always be me. So we're trying to spread the wealth a little bit so that different people can, in their area of interest and their area of expertise, perhaps, and to kind of be the point person for that kind of interface. And then there is the website. So we have estuaryhub.com, which you religiously advertise on your channel, which I really appreciate, by the way. And that too is in a kind of a growth stage. It's not doing what we wanted it to do because there just isn't enough critical mass for people to always be able to find an estuary near where they live. This is a huge country, and even if there were 10,000 people in Estuary, if they're spread out far enough, that would mean 3 in each state or something like that.
Now, there's 250,000 people in the Christian Reformed Church, and there are many places in the United States that don't have a Christian Reformed Church anywhere nearby.
Exactly. Same concept.
Yeah.
Same idea. So again, here too, we have a guy who is particularly interested in making that website work the way we intended it, and he needs help, and he got help. So now there's a team of people working on that. So the thing is taking on a life of its own, and it is seriously cool to see how people are invested in the some of the details. The ELSNet leadership meetings on twice a month. There are people that are stepping forward and say, "Hey, I would like to lead one of those, and I would like to host the leadership meeting." And they feel like they know enough about the protocol to be able to pass it on, in some fashion. So anyway, so now there are these different areas where we're going to sort of empower some people to make a specific contribution to the furtherance of Estuary. And as soon as you do that, then you start talking about, well, what are we actually doing and why? Oh, wait a minute. And how are we marketing this? To whom? Because what you did at your classes meeting, I think that's super cool and super interesting and exciting. And perhaps we'll have opportunities to, maybe go to a Synod meeting, and right after the meeting of Synod, we could, maybe offer a breakfast and have all these members of these delegates to Synod attend our little workshop, and
what a failure.
We'll spread the word.
What a failure.
Wasn't it though?
Dramatic failure.
I know. But it cost us a few bucks and we could afford it, right, Paul?
Yeah. It was fine. It was fine.
Yeah. But at the same time, it does raise the question, okay, so what can Estuary do for the local church?
Yeah.
How do we articulate that? And who do we present it to, and how? That's a whole other way to because you know yourself that from your personal point of view, Estuary is a tool in your ministry at your local church.
Yep.
And Estuary is becoming somewhat of a thing here at Crosspoint Church, so that when you talk to the senior pastor of this church and you say, well, what does the Estuary do for you? Well, actually, the guy was quoted, in the banner article. Yeah, there are people in our congregation who need something like this, and we don't have any other way to offer that. Yeah. So, and then even the scariest part of all, and I always feel kind of strongly that needs to be recognized as a feature of Estuary. There's always going to be people who say, I've kind of had my fill with this whole church thing. And I don't really believe half of what they preach here anymore, or all of it, none of it. And I don't know if I even like the people here. And I don't know if I belong here. And I think I'm just going to call it quits. And then for the pastor or the staff or the elders, or for somebody to be able to say to that person, on your way out, stop by these guys at the Estuary, and you may get a totally different picture. You may find a lot of kindred spirit of people that don't have all the right answers and don't say all the right things about church, and perhaps talk about church in weird ways. But you may be able to find yourself in a different way in a community like that, and perhaps not have the urgent need to just fade into the woodwork and disappear. So I don't know if that's a legitimate function of any kind of ministry at the church, but that's what I'm doing.
Well, I think Estuary grew out of what I saw, how I saw the need, the church wasn't serving a need in the broader community. And it's a need that perhaps people might have experienced something of that when they were in college. But of course, this sort of arose when colleges increasingly were sort of locked up and frozen by these big culture war issues, and people couldn't talk. And so in the Meetup and then in Estuary, people could have conversations and they could say what they thought. And as usual, not everyone around the circle agreed necessarily with what they thought, but there was a good enough spirit in the room that people would at least listen and understand. And at least they felt that they were heard, maybe not agreed with, maybe not even affirmed, but at least understood. And that's something. And churches tend to be fairly programmatic, which is fine. Certainly we want to educate people with respect to the Bible, and certainly we want to educate people with respect to church teaching, and all of that's fine. But there should be a place for more open wondering and conversation where people can not just have a chance to talk, but have a chance to be heard and explore. And so that's, something of what Estuary can do. And I'm excited when I find, where the CRC is at right now in a whole debate around human sexuality, debate around belonging and believing, and where are the lines with the church. Having something like Estuary, which is church adjacent, could afford a whole lot more flexibility than maybe a church can or should be able to offer in certain circumstances. So I still see the importance and the utility. And of course, at Living Stones, when we start in January, 9 a.m. weekly Estuary, it's going to be very interesting to see how people sort of fit that into their lives. For some people, even just being able to say, I'm going to this church and doing this thing at a church, which isn't really a worship service. We're not serving any sacraments at Estuary. If you want sacraments, you're going to have to stay for the second thing after that. You're going to have to stay after the Estuary thing, that the actual worship service. But, I think about the fact that if you look at, let's say, the Ortho Bros, the Orthodox are all excited about their liturgy and their buildings. And, we saw that in Riverside when we visited St. Andrews.
Yeah.
And the Roman Catholics, they're all about the Eucharist, and they've got their liturgy around the Eucharist too. They're all about this. And we had that event in Washington, D.C., very much at a Catholic space. And, that was really a lovely event. And it was a lot of strong participation from Catholics at that event. And Protestants, of course, sort of have music and preaching. That's the two things in a Protestant worship service. Liturgy is a little more implicit. But I do wonder, in terms of the ongoing evolution of society and need now with this radical democratization, with things like social media, where everybody sort of has a voice online, to have a space that is at this point church adjacent, even though it's physically happening inside church buildings, to have a space where you can come and share what you think. And the pastor isn't going to kick you out if what you share is heretical. We will listen to you and we will talk about it. And I, as a pastor, certainly know that there's plenty going on in people's minds when they come into church. It would be nice to have a little idea about what's, bring that out into the open and be able to talk about it. So I really hope, I'm very excited about seeing at least a couple of colleagues in my classes express interest in this in a serious enough way that I think they will start their own groups in a serious enough way that they get involved with your ELSNet meetings to kind of get a taste of it and to get some wisdom and practical guidance about how they could do this themselves. And then I would love for this thing to grow large enough that it's never been exclusively a Christian Reformed thing. There are other Anglican, Lutheran. There's, I don't know if we've got any estuaries going on in any Orthodox churches at this point yet.
There's
But
no edge there.
What's that?
There's no edge there. They encompass the whole world.
You're so bad, John. You're so bad. John Vidong sends ecumenicity back. But I would
no. I want to say something about that. That's serious, because at that meeting that we had in Grand Rapids after Synod, there were a couple of people there.
Yeah.
To particularly our friend Bernie from Hudsonville, who has had a converted JBP meeting, converted into Estuary, and it's been extremely successful there. So much so that, for starters, there's already 2 other spin-offs, or maybe 3 other spin-offs coming out of that estuary in the greater Grand Rapids area alone. But there was also Dave Zelstra, who heard about it and drove all the way from Michigan City, Indiana, all the way to Western Michigan, to Hudsonville, and attended only one of Bernie's sessions, one of Bernie's estuary meetings, and he said, I got to do this. And this guy is a Lutheran pastor. He has some CRC background, but he is a Lutheran pastor, and he has started in his own church, a Lutheran church not in Michigan City. It's in anyways, out there in Michigan, close to Chicago, and in Indiana, close to Chicago. And he does exactly what you are starting. He has one of his Sunday school classes converted into an estuary meeting. A lot of people attend. They keep coming back week after week. Then he thought that was such a cool idea, he was going to do it in his other town where he lives, in Michigan City. There are people that are driving all the way from where his church is at, all the way to where this other open estuary meeting is at, that's open to anyone from the community. And so they are just totally enamored with the concept and the idea. And so he is making it work as a substitute for his Sunday school classes. So one of his Sunday school classes. So what you're trying to do, I think, has some precedent already. I think we should give Dave Zelstra some credit, and also Bernie Grayson in Hudsonville for making that a pretty growing operation out there.
Well, I definitely think so too. And I would like to see enough Christian Reformed churches to do this, so that there could at least be a little bit of consciousness in the broader culture that the Christian Reformed Church is a place where, well, we can talk about things, and there's room for that. And I'd like to see that happen. Well, will it happen or not? Certainly not within my control, but if enough Christian Reformed ministers kind of get the vision for this and get the idea, then we'll see more of them starting up in CRC churches.
Yes, but I do not want this thing to be conceived as a way to shore up the CRC brand, because in TLC, as you well know, there are all kinds of denominations represented and all kinds of Christians from a variety of different backgrounds, some of whom also may have the kind of constructive relationship with their pastors, so that they can show them this video and say, hey, this may be something that could serve our congregation as well, and then to show them the path via Elsnet to get some training, or for these people to be validated in their church communities to lead groups in their churches and truly make it church adjacent. Yeah. And I would not want to limit our promotional efforts to the Christian Reformed Church only, even though it would be really cool if the Christian Reformed Church became known internationally and worldwide as the only denomination where real conversation can happen.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't even want that. But I'm not in any way limiting anything. I would just love to see more of my colleagues take this up.
Very true.
And I think there is a real, when the pastor of the church, and Nate has spoken about this, when the pastor of the church participates in this,
Yes.
And the pastor of the church signals that this is valuable enough that the pastor prioritizes it so that he takes his valuable time to listen to these people from inside and outside the church sharing their thoughts. I think that's a pretty big statement.
Totally. I totally agree. So that would be one of the purposes perhaps of this video, is to encourage people to talk to their pastors, whether they be Christian Reformed or otherwise, and say, hey, you know, this could be truly church adjacent and truly become a way for the church to bridge a gap between the fresh water of the rivers and the salt water of the ocean, and create a space where chaotic though it may be, some real listening and growing and conversation can happen. So yeah, great.
All right, you usually have a list for these conversations. Did we hit everything on your list?
Yep. This is the list here, Paul.
Well, just a little short piece of paper for a little short conversation. So,
well, in part it is because this is really totally where I'm at in terms of my own relationship to Estuary, my participation in it at various different levels, both my local estuary, how it relates to the local church, and how other leaders are finding their way into their communities in relation to their churches. This is totally where I'm at right now. This is all very important to me, and to be able to speak clearly about it and to have the message go out that this all happens and that it exists and that it can be meaningful. Yeah, it's a high priority for me, and so I really want to appreciate. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to wax about this. So,
all right, good. So I guess it's time to land the plane.
Yeah, this is give me the opportunity to wish you well on your journey into Europe, and I'll be on your heels in 2024 when I'm going to be in Europe myself around the same time of the year. And if people are organizing conferences in Europe and they need a spokesperson for Estuary, I'll be happy to make myself available. I'll be there from September 1 through the end of September.
Oh, okay.
Maybe the middle of October. The end
trip.
time is, yeah, we're going to be gone for quite a while. But yeah, I'm going to try and meet with some people in Norway, and hopefully in Germany, and definitely in Holland. So yeah, England. Yeah, we're going to be in London earlier as part of that trip. So I'm basically saying, if you feel a need to have me meet up with you, I'll be happy to do that. Yeah, plenty of time to plan it. So Tayo, get going.
Tayo's become the UK planning.
I know.
Guy.
I'm so proud of him. This is just terrific. Yeah. So anyway.
Very good, John. All right, I will end the video. One love. See, I'm dyslexic, so I never know which way it goes. But I can't find my mouse to end the video. Oh, here it is. Okay, stop recording.